validations, uh, template forms, and we learned about how to validate template forms. In validating template forms, we discussed about form state validation. Form state validation is verifying all fields in the form. Now, individually, we can verify every field in the form. So we call it as input state validation. Input state validation is it is the process of verifying every field in form. So Angular provides validation services for form field. For every form field, it provides validation services. What are those? So we have service, we have property, and description. Already we know, similar to form state, only one extra here. We have ng, pristine. This is pristine. So this is not modified. We have ng, dirty. The property is dirty. It is modified. We have ng, valid. So this is valid. That means here field is valid. We have ng, invalid. That is invalid. This is field is invalid. So we have another ng, touched. This is touched, and this is field touched. Touched means it got focus. When it gets focus and blur. When it gets focus and blur, then it is recognized as touched. And ng, untouched. Untouched, which is defined as untouched. Means not touched. Means it never got focus, right? Then it is touched. We have ng, errors. It is actually errors. It is an optional type. Errors, it tracks all errors. Actually, it is a collection. It is a collection of field errors. It is a collection of field errors. Field errors means invalid, valid, required, min length. All these comes under these errors. Right? So yesterday we learned about validations for all the fields, verifying every field. But now we will see how to handle every field individually, right? Let's see. For example, now in this, I will remove the form state validations that we written yesterday. Form state validations we removed. Rest of form and everything same. Form is same, its validations are same, everything is same. Only that we will not use any form state validation. We can use both combinations, but first I will show you how input state validation works. So we are just defining, all these are removed. Yeah. So we are just defining here a simple form. In the form, we have two fields. One is username, mobile, city. These are the three major options we have, and subscription. What are the validations given for username? You see, for username we given required validation. For username we defined required validation. And for username we are giving, suppose, min length, that is the validation. Min length, how much? Some 4 characters. And for mobile we are giving a pattern that it should start with +91 and 10-digit number. So we need to show errors for every field individually. Let's see how we can define. Let's start this here. There is some problem in starting terminal. We will restart the Visual Studio Code. Okay. So sir project is equal to shopping. Fine. Now let's see how we can define the validations. Here, to define validations, for this field we have 2 validations. We have required and min length. If any field is having multiple validations, then we cannot depend on invalid and valid, because if 2 validations, 2 or 3 validations are there and any one validation failed, then it will return invalid. So problem is, we know that invalid, but we cannot track correctly what is invalid. So that means if a field is having only one validation, then valid and invalid are okay. But if a field contains multiple validations, then if any validation problem occurred, it will return invalid. In that case, it is difficult to identify which field have problem, means which validation problem. Then we have to use these errors. Errors will identify which validation failed. Is it required failed? Is it min length failed? Is it max length failed? Is it pattern failed? It will verify that. So if you are dealing with only one, then you can write invalid, valid. If you are dealing with multiple, then you have to use errors, right? So here currently we are dealing with multiple. The username have required and min length. Similarly, for mobile also we will use required and pattern. That means mobile have 2 validations and username also have 2 validations. Both are required. Now generally we have one more habit of doing this. You have learned in your HTML. If you are using your own validations of your technology, then you don't want HTML validations to fire up. That means already you learned in HTML that HTML have default validations. And if you don't want those default validations to fire up, only your validations to fire up, then for form you have to give an attribute called noValidate. I hope you know this. In HTML forms you have learned that form have an attribute called noValidate. When to use this noValidate? When you are writing your own validations. If I don't use this, then HTML validations will work and our custom validations also will work. That means here actually required is used by Angular. Angular is using required. But the same required can be used by form also. That means we don't need to write validations. Automatically HTML5 have validations. But those HTML5 validations we don't want. We want our Angular validations. In that case, we have to configure it as noValidate. This I hope everybody learned in HTML. For example, see, suppose you are using HTML and in HTML you have a form. In the form you have some text box, name and some text box. Input type is equal to text. So name as user name. And here we have a button. This is submit button. And you have defined required. When you defined required, so the validation for this as required. That means automatically HTML have that validation ability. That means if I click on this submit without entering value, it is working. You don't need any Angular or anything. Already you learned this. HTML5 comes with default validations. But these validations are not satisfied. That means some are okay, some are not according to our requirements. Then we don't want those validations to fire up. So in a form, if you are writing these validations, then HTML will validate. You don't need Angular. You don't need any technology. But problem is some validations are not according to our requirement. In that case, what we do is we want to suppress HTML5 validations and use only our validations. So how to disable this validation? If you don't disable, both validations will work. HTML validations will work. Your Angular validation also will work. So in that case, we have an habit of writing. What is it? noValidate. HTML form provides noValidate. This indicates that it is not going to validate now. When I click submit, then refresh, submit, it submits. Without verifying, it will submit. Why you have disabled validation? If validation is good, then why they have given an option to bypass validation? If validation is good, why they have given an option to skip it? That means those validations may not satisfy your requirements every time. If they don't satisfy your requirements every time, then you write your own validations. For example, suppose I am using email. For email, you have input type email. Email is default email validation. It is default email validation. So I will remove this required. Suppose I am typing here email. So that means I type it, suppose John, and click on submit. So it is saying please include @net. So it is saying please include @net. And if I include @net and say John GM, and if I submit, it says it is valid. But that is not a valid email for us, right? That means email validation is there, but it is not according to your requirement. Then why you need this? Then what we do, we want to bypass. Then what we have to do, we have to write no validate. So in HTML, no validate is an attribute given to form to tell that skip HTML validations. If validations are good, why to skip them? We saw the reason why to skip them. So it is very good to use this no validate when you are using Angular validations. Why? Because if you don't use, both validations will work. It will be heavy for application, right? Either you use HTML validation or you use Angular. And when you are using Angular, suppress HTML validations. That will be better. So we have to use no validate. Okay. Now, how to write validation for this? Let's see. We will access this localhost. Yeah. We will access this and we want to write validation for username mobile. Then see, as I already told you, I will tell you the point. So we are writing a data definition. For this, I will put here class text danger. Okay. Now, here I will define two messages because we have two validations. We need two messages. One message is user name required. Okay. Second message is name to short. That is the name. So you can write detail like min 4 characters. So anything, whatever you want to display. Now these are two messages. When this entire block should display, first you have to decide it. When that entire block should add. This entire block should add when the username is invalid. When username is invalid, this block should add. That means for this block, we write a condition ng if. You know how to add and remove a block. Ng if. When to add? When the username is invalid. That means username dot invalid. When username is invalid, this block will be added. But in that block, two messages are there. Both messages will display. Both messages will display. You can see here, both messages are going to display there. But I want the first message to display when I want this message to display when required problem occurred. And this message to display when min length problem occurred. In that case, here we need to define this span should be added ng if. It should be added when username dot errors. We have to use errors. Errors is a question mark. Errors is an optional property. In that, we have to access an array. In the array, you have to define what is the problem, which error, What is the error name? Required is the error. That means if there is required error, this will return is required true or false. If required is true, then this will be added. Required is true. Now we will put the same for the second one. What we have to do, ng if username dot errors. In the errors we have which property? Min length. For min length, this message should display. For required, this message should display. So we have the two messages here displaying. Now see here, it is showing name required. And when I am typing any name inside it, it says name too short. And I entered the name, then it is fine. You can add any number of validations. So, but for every validations, you have to write the validation error. So, name too short, and here username required. Here lot of points are there. For example, the point is I don't want actually, you see, whenever I opened a form, it is showing this message. I don't want message to display until or unless they submit the form. Right? Until or unless they submit the form. See, you cannot open a registration form with errors without they started. Right? Any registration form will not try to show message validations until or unless they started using it. That means you cannot open a form and show directly errors. That's not great. That means show these errors only when they try to submit. So, or show these errors if they touched that field. Right? For example, now what we have to do is, so this block should display when username is invalid. That block should display when username is invalid, and not only username is invalid. So here I will write another condition. How do we know form submitted or not? To know form submitted or not, we have frm register dot submitted. Yesterday we learned. It verifies whether form submitted or not. Form submitted and username is invalid. This indicates that form is submitted and username is invalid. So then it will display the error messages. Now you can see here, you can see by default error message will not be there. When the error message will start, when they try to submit without entering anything. When they try to submit without entering anything, it shows username required. We can later send the data. Sending the data we will do later. We will use this submit later. So that we have to do after all the validations and APIs. So here, by default, it will not display any error message. When you click on register, then it will fire up that message. That is good. Right? Don't display the message until or unless they started the form. Or you can do one more thing. What you can do is, they clicked inside it, without typing they come out. That means it is treated as touched. Then you can add that condition also. This is one condition. This is one condition. And or, we can use or. What is the other condition? Username dot touched. Username touched and username is invalid. These are the two conditions now. That means we are defining two conditions. We are configuring two conditions. One condition is username form submitted and username is invalid. Or another condition is Username touched and username is invalid. That means now what happens here is we clicked inside that. Without typing, we came outside. Then it will show name required because it identifies that it is touched. So, or you directly clicked the register, then it says display because we are using both conditions. That means it is submitted or it is touched. It is touched and you came out, then it will display the message. So we have to use combination of touched, combination of invalid, and combination of form state also, input state and form state. Same you can do for everything now. Suppose for mobile, same. What to do? For mobile, I am defining here. So first, here the conditions are same. First we will put a class text danger, and here we will write the condition. This is ng if when to display. When mobile dot submitted, FRM register dot submitted and mobile dot invalid, and mobile is invalid. Form is submitted and mobile is invalid. Or another condition is mobile dot touched and mobile touched and mobile is invalid, and mobile is invalid. Then this block should display mobile touched and invalid, then this block should display. But in this block we have two messages. One message is mobile required, that is the message. Another message is invalid mobile. We want two messages because for mobile validation we already written a pattern and it should verify the pattern and it should return invalid. So first span should display ng if, it should display here mobile dot errors. Errors is an optional. In that dot we can access the error is what required. And the second one should display here ng if and here mobile dot errors, and in the errors, so here we defined as what is the problem pattern, because whether it is valid or not, it is verified by which validation property pattern. Remember, these are HTML validation properties. Which HTML validation property you are verifying, that you have to define here. So it is ready now. You can see currently all are empty here. That means we don't have any other anywhere. Somewhere we missed this if condition. Somewhere a quote is missed or some error happened. Yeah. Where mobile touched and mobile invalid, FRM register. Somewhere in this area problem occurred. Okay, somewhere in data definition only problem occurred. right? So we have the data definition. What problem occurred? NGIF, okay. Asterisk is missing for NGIF, right? Fine, let's run this. Yeah. Now here, this is the validation. Now these validations will not fire up until you touch those fields or you click inside it. That means you touch or you click the submit. When we click the submit, both messages will come. Or you click in any particular field and click outside, then it says mobile required. You click inside this username and say username required. I am entering the username, then it verifies username short, then it is okay. I am entering the mobile number, so it shows invalid mobile. Until, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because it should start with plus 9, 1. Now it is fine. Because that is according to the pattern. So what are the validations you are configuring? Those validation attributes you need to define here. So technically, first step is you have to design a block that verifies whether the field is valid or invalid. In that block, you need to display all the error messages. So which error occurred and how to handle the message. You can use all your HTML validations. Now here important is, suppose here we have these options. Suppose city is there. In city, we given an option as select your city. That is the option we are giving here. Now the point is, how do we identify that they have selected city or not? Which validation attribute we can use? Can I use required for this? Can we use required validation for drop down? No, we cannot. Because even first one is also identified as city. It thinks that the first option is also city. But we know that it is not city. So that means everything in form you cannot validate using the services. Then you have to write your own validation. That is what we call as custom validation. Custom validation means you need to write your own validation. Everything you cannot satisfy with general validation services available. So you have to write your own validation. So to write our own validation, then obviously we have to use events. We have to follow the event, and through events we can write the validation. That means you cannot use validation services for every purpose. Then you have to depend on custom validation. That means these are limited. These are only for up to certain type. Others you have to manually buy. For example, see how to handle that now. Suppose here I have to display validation, and validation is when user is selecting a city, if he selects the first one, then we should show a message that please select your city. So otherwise we should not display any message, right? It is compulsory. So we cannot use required attribute here. There is no chance. Then we have to write our own validation. So first, when user submits these values, then what we will do is, for first option, we will put a value as -1. That is traditionally in real world projects, what we do is the first one is not considered as a city, because generally any collection starts with index number 0. If it is -1 means it is not there. That is our tradition actually. Anywhere -1 returns means you learnt already array functions. In array functions you learnt index of, last index of like functions. If you are writing a character and that character is not present in that particular list, then what it will return? -1. That is tradition. You can give anything, doesn't matter. So some people have an habit of writing not a city. You can write anything, right? Just you have to verify that. But traditionally, so I will give here -1. And it's not mandatory to give that. You can give any name, right? Anything. So I'm giving -1. This value is Delhi. And this value is Hyderabad. Now first we need to collect the value what they have entered. When to collect? When they are changing the city. So here we have to use the option change. Change is the event. When user is changing the city, we will write verify city function. Into that verify city function, we will send the city name. Through $event we can send. Already we learned that. $event will send all the object related properties and event related properties. So the current object related value you can send by using this event, using that event. Now let's go and write that event here. That means here we have to write the event. What is the event we need to write initially here? The event is verify city. That is the event. It is expecting E is an any type of object. Now we have to create one more option. That is, we will create a property called is city valid. Is city valid? Here by default I will keep it as Boolean type and I will put true. Is city invalid I will give. Okay. Is city invalid? It is a Boolean type and I will set it to true. By default city invalid is true. Now what we will do is here we will write an option condition. If e dot target dot name target dot value, that means drop down value. We are collecting the drop down value. If the value is equal to -1, everything you send is a string type. If it is -1, that means if the value you sent is -1, that means they selected the first one. Then what we do is this dot is city invalid is true. Is city invalid is true. Otherwise, else we will put this dot is city invalid is false. False. That means if it is -1, that means they haven't selected any city. This time city valid or not, that depends on our own validation. And here this is city valid we will apply here. That means verify city. Okay. Here we will write a data definition. In the data definition we will put a span. Here we will say please select city. Please select your city. And here I will put the class as text danger. And here I will apply ngIf and it will get from is city invalid. So that is the property. So is city invalid. Is city invalid. So invalid, right? That is what it has to do. By default, is city invalid is true. By default, it is true. Then you can see here it says, please select your city. And I am selecting the city, then it is fine. And I am selecting a city. I am selecting the first one. It says, please select your city. So it will validate and it will verify the value. That means we have to write our own validations. You cannot depend on validation services for every type of validation. So because lot of validations depends on lot of logical functions, everything we don't have as a service. Even you cannot write regular expressions for every purpose also. You have to do lot of manual work. For example, see, suppose I am giving, all others are working same, others are working similar way. For example, suppose here I am writing another data term, say verify, say challenge. Like this I am giving verify challenge. I am giving like verify challenge. And usually here what is the challenge? I am giving a data definition. So here I will put as enter even number. Enter even number. That is the challenge, right? Enter even number. And here I given a text box. Input type is equal to text. That means now I have to verify they entered a text. They entered a even number or not. How do you verify even number or not? Can you write any regular expression for this? Is it uppercase or not? We can write regular expression. Is it lowercase or not? We can write regular expression. But is it having at least one uppercase letter? For that also we can write regular expression. But you cannot write regular expression for such things. Then what we have to do? We have to do some mathematical work. Take the value entered, modulus divide by 2, verify remainder is 0, then it is even. So you have to do lot of manual functionality here. So that means what we have to do is here, we will define this as name as even. And here ng model and hash even is equal to ng model. Now whenever user is typing or finished typing means we will use blur event. Depends on what validations you are using. I will use a blur event. And blur event, I will say verify even. And into this, I need to send the value I have typed. That means by using $event. Now I need to write another option. Blur indicates when it loses the focus after typing, right? Now let's go here. We will create another property. Another property is even invalid. So boolean. So by default boolean is equal to, suppose I am giving false. I will not display until or unless he types something inside it, right? Default I don't want to display. Okay, now here I have to write another verify even. And here we are collecting the value entered by them. So here we are verifying, but whatever the value, so here if e dot target dot value means whatever value they entered in text box is modulus divided by 2 and remainder is equal to 0. But whatever they entered inside a text box will be treated as a string type. You cannot divide by 2. Then what we will do is we will use parse int. By using parse int, we will translate that and we will divide by 2. Otherwise, you will fail in this spot. Because you know that anything entered through text box or drop down will be a string by default. You have to convert. If it is true, then this dot is even invalid is false because it is an even number. Even number invalid is false. If it is not returning 0 as a reminder, that means it is not an even number. That means this dot is even invalid is true. Invalid is true. And this we have to attach to this interface. This is verify even. So verify even. So what is that? Verify spelling, right? Verify even. Okay. Now that is what we are handling here. Now we will put a message here. In the data definition, we will put here ng if it will return. So is even invalid. Even invalid. That is what we are configuring. If even invalid, then put a span and display a message not an even number. That is the message we want to show. That means now you go here and select city that is satisfied, and here I am entering a number. Suppose I am entering the number some 3, then it says not an even number. We will put text danger also, the class as text danger. And you can see that it is select city and you see it is 3, then it is not an even number. Suppose I entered 4, then it is an even number. That means anything wrong entered, then it will display the message. So some you can handle by using validations, validation services, but some you cannot do that. For that, what you have to do is we have to create our own validation. You can write patterns up to certain levels. You can write patterns. For example, when I am trying here, see, suppose I am using a data term password and data definition input type is equal to password, and this password have name is equal to password, ng model and hash password is equal to ng model, and password have a pattern. Pattern for password is so I am writing the pattern question mark equal dot star square base a hyphen z. This indicates at least one uppercase letter. Slash w 4 comma 15. That is the pattern I written here. This indicates that this pattern indicates that password must be 4 to 15 characters with at least one uppercase letter. That is the pattern. Generally, these patterns you learned in your HTML, JavaScript, how to write regular expressions. Now, if it is not matching, then I need to display. Then I don't need any custom validation because already pattern is a validation attribute. Through that you can verify. You don't need custom validation for this because already pattern can be verified. So what we do now here, so here we are simply adding a data definition. In the data definition, I will put class is equal to text danger, and here I will put here ng if is equal to condition. Condition is password form touched, right? Here frm register dot submitted, form register submitted, and password password is invalid. If password is invalid, or you have touched it and it is invalid, you can use any option for that. Or another condition here is password dot touched and it is invalid, and the password is invalid. Then I need to display a message here, span. But this span, see, it depends on how you are configuring. So here I will say required also. That means first message is password required. Second message is, so password must have at least one uppercase letter. This I am giving. Must have at least one uppercase letter. And this condition should display ng if. So this is password dot errors. In errors we have an error attribute. Error attribute is required, and this must display ng if. So password dot errors. In the errors we have this is pattern related. So you can manage several validations with this pattern. You can manage your email validations, you can manage your mobile validations, password validations, but everything is not possible with regular expression. In that case, we have to write our own validation. So here, this is the password validation. So that means you can see the password is here. Just let's verify only the password here. You see, I clicked inside it and it says password required. I'm entering the password here. So then it says password must have at least one uppercase letter. Currently password is not having any uppercase letter. Alphanumeric it is having, but uppercase letter is not there. Then I added one uppercase letter anywhere, then it will be okay. So if that is not added, then it is invalid. Anywhere one uppercase letter is added, it is okay. That is generally depends on your skill level of how you write the validation patterns. Majority of the validations we manage using such regular expressions. And if they are not satisfied with regular expressions, then we go with custom validations. So validations are very simple. Now you can write validation, for example, suppose radios checkboxes are there. Then you can verify if checkbox checked, then valid, not checked, then invalid. For every element, depending on its nature, you have to write the validation. But for that, you need to first decide which event is correct. Now, what is the custom validation I can give for this? For example, when user types a capital letter, I need to give him a warning, right? Caps is on. Okay, I am asking him to type capital letter, but I need to show him a warning that caps is on. Right? Already it is doing the validation. Password is doing already validation. But I want to show one warning that caps is on. But when they type capital letter, it should say caps is on. Right? In that case, here, so I will write the validation. How to verify caps is on? They typed a capital letter or not, how to verify that. So for this, we will write one simple event here. See, we will write the event called key up. We write key up event. Key up event to verify the characters, but we don't want to verify characters because whether they typed a capital letter or not depends on the character code, because they can type capital letter in any way. They can use caps lock, they can use a shift key, they can use alt keys. Alt key also gets capital letters. In that case, then key up cannot get the character codes. Then you have to use an event called key press. I hope you learned in JavaScript what is difference and when to use key up and key press. Key up is used to verify the characters. Key press is used to verify the characters code. Right? So we are verifying key press. On key press, what we will do is verify caps. I am just giving it. Then here we will pass $event. It will send. Okay. We have to write that here now. That means I am writing here verify caps, and we are accessing that event, any type here we are defining there. That is verify caps. What verify caps have to do is it should verify and display the message. That means, so I will create one more property. So is caps. Is caps is a boolean and it is by default false. Is caps is by default false. Now when is caps will be true, so what we do is we will verify if e have an e is event argument, e dot key code. Key code will get the character code. If the key code is greater than or equal to 65 and e dot key code is less than or equal to 90, this indicates that it is capital letter, because capital letters code will be 65 to 90. If it is between 65 to 90, the key code, then we will put this dot is caps is equal to true. Otherwise, we will put this dot is caps is equal to false. And I want to put an additional warning here. So what I will do is, here beside the password only, I will put a span. And in this span, we will put another span which contains the class bi and bi exclamation triangle we will use. Exclamation triangle, and we will say here caps on. Right? And here we will put this as class as text warning. And when to display this span, ng if it is coming from is caps. It is coming from is caps. That means now what happens is, when you are typing here, this is password, and I am typing password, it is showing the values here. And very important, when I enter uppercase, it says caps on. That means it shows a warning that caps on. If I remove this and I continue, now normal. Accidentally I type caps, then it says caps on. We are manually verifying that. That means everything you cannot handle by using custom validation. Everything you cannot handle by using validation service. You need a combination. That's what generally we do. Right? So technically, when you are dealing with validations, you should know about all these methods. So custom validations. Radios checkbox is also same, because many people will come up with question like how to write for radios. Or I given everything, then you can write for radio also. You can try. Right? If it is checked, then it is okay. Not checked, based on which property? Check. We have to get checked true or false. Based on that, you can display messages. So here, we are configuring. This is an example. So this is template form dot component dot ts. So this is ts, template form component dot ts, and template form dot component dot html, and this is template form html. Here one more very important concept is, so this is the example I given to you. Here very important is, actually suppose if this field is not valid, that means username is not valid, then I want to show this in red color, right? That means I want to put a red box if it is invalid. Of course you can do that, because you learned how to apply dynamic classes. By using the dynamic classes we can apply. That means we can apply by using dynamic classes manually. Already yesterday I showed you, if form is invalid, then red color, valid, green color. Similarly, you can apply class for every input field, right? You can write here every input field ng class. If it is valid, one effect. If it is invalid, another effect, but not required. One of the specialty about Angular is, actually Angular provides validation classes also. Along with validation services, Angular provides validation CSS classes better. Validation CSS classes. Many people don't know about this, because actually these are there from Angular, before Angular, when it was Angular JS. When it was Angular JS, it was there. Many people who learnt Angular, they don't know about these validation classes. People who are coming from the background of Angular JS and Angular, they migrated from Angular JS to Angular, they know that these classes are still available. Actually, they were introduced in the first Angular JS, before it was Angular. But the new people who learnt about new Angular, they don't have an idea that, so this is there. They just use ng class, because in Angular they learnt about class binding. But very few people who are experienced and who know that the library is still continuing, they know that these classes are available and they can utilize these classes. What are these classes? We have the classes like, we have, so ng sim, we have like ng pristine, we have like ng dirty, we have like ng valid, we have like ng invalid, we have like ng touched, we have like ng untouched. All these classes are available. What is the specialty about these classes is, they can automatically verify is it valid or invalid. You don't need to bind class. Without binding ng class, they can verify whether the field is valid or invalid. So how we write this? Actually, see what I am doing here. Simple. Here I am writing, go to CSS file now. In the CSS file, I am writing input. Input means input elements. If input element is dot, what is the Angular class? ng invalid. That is the Angular class. If input field is returning invalid, then this class can catch it. This class can catch it. Then what to do is, we will put border as 2 pixel solid red color, and we will put box shadow as 2 pixel, 3 pixel, 3 pixel red color. Like this we can apply. So that means you see now here, so you see here, if all the fields are invalid, all the fields are invalid, that means here I am selecting, I am entering the name, now it is fine. I am entering some password, some password, then that is so fine. But caps lock is on, it is showing that warning, right? That is only warning, we already learned that. Now mobile, I entered some mobile, then it is fine. And I entered some less characters, that means it is invalid. It is invalid. Name too short, red color. And it is valid, then it is fine. This is good. I haven't used any class binding here. No ng class. No ng class. We are not using any ng class. That means we are directly applying. We are directly applying this. But if any input field is not there, suppose it is a drop down or some checkbox, then we have to use ng class. You don't need to use ng class until or unless you have these features. That means these classes are available. You can simply write if input is ng valid, if input is ng valid, the same we will do, and we will convert them into green. That means we will put it into green. That means we will display in green. That will be fine. That means whenever you entered any field here, right, you entered anything here, it will be green. So if it is valid, if it is invalid, you can put predefined validation classes. These are very rarely known to the people who learned Angular. Right? These are always known to the people who are coming from the background of before Angular. Because they use this, they have this, and Angular team is continuing this library, but not exploring this. That means in very few documentations these are mentioned. Right? In a very few documentations these are mentioned that we have these classes, you try them. But people who know Angular from its evolution, they know that these are there still continuing. Right? So these are advantage is without writing class binding, they can apply the effects that will be better. So this is by using class. This is the example. This is the class. This is which one? We have to add, what is it? Template form dot component dot CSS. In CSS you add this, it will automatically identify whether it is valid or invalid, and it will apply that. Right? These are validation classes, and these are all input state related options. This is complete how we can work with template forms. Now the same thing we have to see, how do we work with the reactive forms. Reactive forms are we also called as model driven forms. Model driven forms. Dynamically creating forms elements, how to manage. That we'll see next session. Right? In next session, we will finish the concept of forms. Reactive forms, very important. In interviews, you will get a lot of questions related to reactive forms. So many questions you will get. So you have to be very perfect in that. That we will see in next session. Monday we will see that. Right? In Monday session, we will finish forms. Then we will go into another major part, that is routing. So which makes our application as perfect single page application. To achieve single page application, you need routing. That's what major thing that we will see after these forms, right? Monday will continue, right?